So we are in David Greenspan's office, and we're going to talk a little bit about his panel on changing currents in employment law, use of experts in employment cases. And Dave, give us just a sense of what we can expect for the panel on experts in employment cases.
Sure.
What, if I'm at the changing currents CLE, what might I see on that panel?
We're going to cover a couple things at a high level, and we're going to drill down into each of them. The first thing we're going to talk about is just selection issues. What makes a good expert, how you select experts, coming at it from plaintiff side and defense perspectives, and we're going to talk about things that we see in terms of what makes a good expert and what things you might want to avoid. We're also going to talk about the rules, and there have been changes, the 2010 amendments. In DC, there were amendments in 2015. So we're going to talk through all those technical issues in terms of discovery, the reports, the requirements, and then we'll focus on qualification issues as well as just some Daubert cases, recent developments in that regard. And then we're going to talk a fair amount just about depositions and trial issues. How the expert really plays into the narrative of a case, whether you're telling the story as a plaintiff or you're telling the story as an employment defendant.
So let's take a situation where you have a new case and you're talking to your client about the use of experts. When do you use experts in an employment case?
So I have to break that question into two parts because there's traditional employment cases, single plaintiff cases, where somebody is bringing a disparate treatment claim based on their belief that something happened to them with respect to their employment. And that's from an employment management side perspective, it's more of a defensive posture. So I have various experts and fields that I'm always watching out for, but I want to let the plaintiff kind of lead the dance, for lack of a better term, whether or not there's going to be a vocational expert or an econ expert, whether or not there's going to need to be an IME, any medical issues that come into play. And then there's always that fourth category that folks don't focus on, but we're going to talk about in the session, which is attorney's fees. On both sides, quite frankly. Sometimes having expert testimony ready for attorney's fees is something that people forget about. They get to trial and it's either too late or it's insufficient. Now, the other type of employment case that we frequently litigate are, I call them employment mobility cases, trade secret, non-compete defamation cases. And those are cases where I think both sides are looking at it from an offensive and defensive posture. And in those regards, I think valuation of things, whether it's a document, a line of business, a person's value to a practice or company, those are the types of issues where we have to be a lot more, in my opinion, proactive. And we'll talk through those issues in the session.
So what makes a good expert in your mind?
I think first and foremost, a good expert is someone who can tell a story. I think being qualified and having the chops to opine to a reasonable degree of certainty is just everybody that you retain ought to be able to do that. So it's our job as lawyers to make sure that we put that person in front of the client, in front of the court, and eventually in front of a jury. But a good expert can come in and weave their portion of the narrative into your overall story. It requires the ability to talk like a human being. It requires the ability not to talk at people. It requires the ability to actually be vulnerable in some regards, because I think that one mistake I see, and this is not an issue for experts, I think it's lawyers, witnesses, just everybody through the narrative, is you're infallible. Everything I'm saying is true and there's nothing about what I'm saying that's at all, gray. And I don't think that's an appropriate way to tell a story, and I think for experts it's very much true. So I want an expert who can say, here's my opinion, here's how it fits in, here's what's strong, and here's where there might be two sides, but why this perspective is the stronger of the two.
Talk to us a little bit about the vocational expert and kind of what you look for in a good vocational expert and when you're using a vocational expert in a case.
So it's interesting because in this area, in the DMV, there aren't that many vocational experts. I think we are recycling the same handful of folks in this field as compared to other fields more often than not. And my view on vocation experts, they need to be able, again, to tell a story about, from my perspective, here's what a person in a reasonable position, this is how long it should take them to find employment, and this is the level of employment they could expect to find. And you know, I think we've talked about this before recently. It really does go to, you know, how it fits into the story. So if a witness is on the stand as a plaintiff saying, I haven't been able to find work in the 18 months since I filed my lawsuit, and there's an expert who's saying, yes, the average person with your experience could do this in 9 months and could have earned an income at 80% of what you were making, not only is that impactful for mitigation, but it also kind of undercuts the story that the plaintiff's telling about what kind of person they are and how hard they're looking for a job.
So the mitigation story matters.
The mitigation story matters, and it's something that I think it's something that I've always viewed as a vocation. You know, from a defense perspective, what a vocation expert is there to do is not just set the parameters, but also limit the exposure in terms of mitigation and the credibility of the plaintiff if that person isn't really trying as hard to get employment as they say they are. A lot of people are out there looking every day. They've got their LinkedIn profiles. They produce volumes of documents. Nowadays, it's easier to do that. And you know, you can see that they're trying very hard. It doesn't work then, but a lot of people are not that as aggressive in looking.
I got it. So tell us a little bit about you. I mean, you when you're not lawyering and you know you're not with your family, kind of where do you spend your time? What's your passion?
Sports. I actually am with my family or lawyering 99% of the day, like most of us are. But I love local sports. I play tennis. I play tennis a fair amount and would like to pay a fairer amount. And I also do pick up basketball with the same group of guys. So in the evenings after homework is done and the kids are getting ready for bed, off I go, and hopefully once or twice a week get to play with my buddies.
Sounds great. David, thank you.
Thank you.